Hey everybody, welcome to the Hey Bellingham podcast. It's a podcast about all things Bellingham. Each episode, we chat with local business owners, artists, musicians, and other community members to learn about their stories and what makes Bellingham so special. We also share tips on where to eat, drink, and play in a beautiful city. Whether you're on a long-time resident or visiting, Hey Bellingham is the perfect way to get to know your community. So sit back, relax, and enjoy listening. And today we're excited to welcome Tyson Simmons to today's episode of the Hey Bellingham podcast. Welcome, Tyson. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your experience with Bellingham. Are you a native or are you someone that's came in like I did and I'm kind of sneaking my way in to try to become a part of the community?
I am not a native Bellingham resident, but my mom actually went to Western Washington University, so I do have some ties to Bellingham from previously. I just kind of ended up here randomly. Actually, my one of my best friends in high school was like, "I'm moving to Bellingham to go to Whatcom Community College, and I've got a 2-bedroom apartment. Do you want to live in the other bedroom?" I said, "Sure, why not?" So I moved over here, and it's got a lot of the things that I look for in a town. You know, access to nature, snowboarding close by, mountain biking. The ocean's right there. It's a pretty beautiful place. Also, I grew up in such a small town that I didn't think I could move directly into a major city, but Bellingham to me has the city feel that I didn't grow up with. We're in Eastern Washington in a smaller town. So Bellingham is like kind of a big city to me, without going into like a major metropolitan area like a Seattle. So I think I got the best of both worlds with the big city feel, but also maintaining kind of a smaller town atmosphere.
Yeah, you get the amenities of a big city to a certain degree without the craziness of, well, traffic especially. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people start moving up here from the bigger cities, like Seattle and the surrounding areas. That's kind of how we moved up to Bellingham. Was were living in Seattle for a while, and then the traffic gets crazy, and yeah, Bellingham's a um, good mix. You could still get to the city, and it's still small enough.
Have you
That's
guys
not.
have you guys ever noticed that the corridor between, like, I think it's Iowa and getting down into Fairhaven on the freeway, that's like the scariest place to drive on the 5. I don't know if you guys have experienced that or not.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, all the
definitely.
on ramps right there are so short that people are
Yeah,
getting on the freeway at like 40 miles an hour.
right.
Yeah.
It slows down there a little bit.
Yeah, my wife was an emergency nurse for a little while there. She I guess she retired, which is kind of fun to say. But anyway, there was so many times that would be the spot where there'd be an accident or rollover and all this kind of stuff. And so we have this weird thing that we do that we're always checking the traffic reports or the police reports about what happened there. And it's way more often than it should be that something happens there. I don't get it, but anyway, yeah, those short on ramps don't help. So Tyson, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm the director of human resources at hardware sales in Bellingham. That's my current position. I've been with the company, actually, it'll be 9 years on the 6th. So we're 2 days out from my 9-year anniversary, which is great. I spent most of my time so far with hardware sales working for our e-commerce division, which, being in Bellingham, most people don't even realize that hardware sales has an e-commerce division, but we have a whole nother side of our company that's all online, and it's not on the same site as our downtown Bellingham store. And since no one really searches hardware sales to buy online, they wouldn't really know it. We actually do business as Onkata is our business name on Amazon.
Huh.
So we're like a third-party logistics company on Amazon, but that's where I first started working with hardware sales. So for almost 5 years, I was an operations manager with our warehouse in Ferndale, Washington. And then we actually opened up a distribution center in Indianapolis, Indiana, so we could really hit the East Coast with 2-day shipping, which is a big requirement on Amazon, and we're a prime seller, so we kind of had to fulfill those requirements. So we opened up a fulfillment center out in Indianapolis, and then I actually had the opportunity to move out to Indianapolis. So I was there for 3.5 years. I was running our facility there as a director of operations for that facility, and then still working with the people back here in Washington to make sure that we were doing everything the same and following the same procedures, so we could all keep records going and things like that. And then that job, even though it was operations by title, it included a huge amount of personnel management. So we didn't really have an HR person necessarily at the internet division. So as the operations manager, I kind of became that like liaison between the corporate headquarters and the different locations that I worked at. So I was doing all the hiring, terminations if necessary, recruiting, and then when people started on their first day, I would do all the onboarding. I'd fill out all their paperwork for them, you know, all the government forms, the I-9s, the W-4s. So I kind of got, you know, my feet wet more or less with the HR world because I was kind of just doing all those things as part of my regular job. And then hardware sales actually had a general manager that had worked here for 40 years, which was pretty impressive. And she kind of, as the GM role, kind of did all things like finance and HR. So we didn't really have like a dedicated HR person, but she did that as part of her overarching job title. And that was kind of like the end of 2022 when she was talking about retiring. And, you know, at that around that time, I kind of looked into SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and I was looking around at like getting my certification because for me, I'd realized, you know, I'm doing all this HR stuff, but I've never really been trained on it formally. So I should really learn more about it. And, you know, so I figured out it did actually qualify for the SHRM exams, which was pretty cool. Took the SHRM SCP, which is the Senior Certified Professional, and I passed it. So I got SHRM certified, which I was really excited about. And I really just did that for myself. I wasn't trying to like, you know, get an HR job necessarily. I was just like, hey, I'm working at Harbor Sales, love my job. I just want to know more about it so I can do better. It was like right at that time. So I emailed the GM and I was just, hey, just so you know, like I got the certification. And just, I'm not asking for anything, but I just wanted to let you know because you can keep it in my file or whatever. And she's like, I'm going to retire in, you know, 2 months. And we kind of want to split my GM role into 2 different positions, with somebody who's really dedicated to finance, somebody who's really dedicated to human resources. And she's like, you've already been doing this stuff for, you know, almost 8 years at this point. I'd moved to Indiana and had run our facility there. So I was kind of like the top of the ladder at our facility there. She's like, do you want to come back to Bellingham and be the HR person for Harbor Sales? So that's kind of how I ended up in my current position. But I've fully embraced the HR community. I always say I went from like a quasi HR position to like now an actual real HR position, which I've talked to other HR professionals in the area and they seem to have a similar career path. Like some people just kind of end up in HR based on their previous experience, but
I love it. I love the intentionality of going, I just want to teach myself. I want to learn, and then it pays forward in huge ways. Yeah. I think it was 2 years ago, I was investigating the amount of money I invested in myself in terms of my own development in my business. And then I compared that to the money I've invested in marketing and the return I got from that. And we won't talk about that side because it's ugly. But for me, my return was 15.4x. So for every dollar I spent on myself and developing myself, I got $15.40 back, just because I could tell what I did directly in return to me, new clients and opportunities. So I love it that you pursued it that way. And it's kind of not on accident, but like it returned to you in a very, very helpful way. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I've always liked learning new things. So it's any opportunity I can get to do that stuff is great.
So 9 years on the 6th, you said?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congrats, man. That's really great.
Thank you.
And I want to just grab the name of the Amazon business for hardware sales again. What was the name so people can look that up?
Yeah, it's Onkata, Onkata. It's all one word.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. So you talked about snowboarding. You talked about that's something that you really enjoy. Can you talk to us about what your experience is in Bellingham with snowboarding and maybe in comparison to other experiences that you've had?
Yeah. So I grew up over in Twisp in Winthrop, Washington, which is kind of a small town in the north central Cascades, right on the other side of Highway 20. So it's about a 3-hour drive from Bellingham in the summer, as long as the pass is open. And we've got a tiny little ski hill there called the Loop Loop Ski Bowl. It has one lift. It was probably 1,200 feet vertical. There were like 8 runs. But that's where I started skiing when I was 3 years old. So I've been going up there pretty much my whole life. And my dad actually ended up running the food and beverage operations for their tiny little day lodge there, so people could buy food and drinks. So I would always, hitch a ride with him in the morning. He'd go up at like 6 a.m. to get everything ready for the day. And I was like the 13-year-old kid just tagging along so I could go skiing and snowboarding. So that's really what I grew up doing. And we got enough snow over there where you could, build little jumps in the backyard and, hike up the hill next to my house and kind of ride down it, which was fun. And then did a little bit of backcountry stuff, but coming to Bellingham and going to Mount Baker, I'd been to other ski resorts in the area, some in Idaho, some in Washington, and you don't really realize like Baker is a pretty legendary ski hill. I didn't know a lot about it before I moved to Bellingham, but it's like the world record for most snowfall ever at a ski resort in the entire world. And the terrain is just second to none in terms of the access that you have from a chairlift. Pretty incredible. So I've loved coming over here and being able to grow that part of my life as well.
Yeah, you probably didn't have much chance in Indiana.
There was no snowboarding in Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife grew up in Michigan, or some of her growing up was in Michigan, and they would, if they went skiing, it was literally on a pile of trash. Like there was an old dump, and they used that as the ski resort. So, yeah, the Midwest doesn't exactly have great things for skiing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, when it comes to your job and what you do in it, what are some of the insights you've gained from being in an HR profession?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things I've realized, both coming from operations and then now transitioning to HR and really any business, is it's all about the people that work for you. You can have the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have the people that can execute those ideas, then your business isn't going to go anywhere. So working at the internet division, we really got into Japanese lean manufacturing business
Mm,
practices. So like Kaizen, continuous improvement models, doing large lean improvements. And then we turned that into like another local Bellingham business is Fast Cap. If you've heard of them, they kind of build like specialty woodworking tools and some other things like that. They're really big into lean, and the owner of Fast Cap is Paul Akers, and he wrote a book called 2 Second Lean. And that's kind of if you read about lean, you see like there's Six Sigma. You can become like a black belt in Six Sigma. There's a couple other versions of lean. But his version is kind of the one that we fell into the most, the 2 Second Lean model, which is really like empowering people who do the jobs every day to have a voice over how their own job works and be able to make a difference and improve their job. And I've been lucky enough to work for a family-owned business who gives me the opportunity to make those types of improvements. But one thing I've realized when I interview people all the time for positions, and a lot of them are coming from big corporations or big box stores, and one of the biggest complaints I get from people is, I was just a cog in a machine. I had
mm.
no say over my job. Somebody at a corporate office over in Oklahoma tells us this is how you need to stock your shelves. Well, when that actually, the rubber meets the road and you're out in the store and you're stocking a shelf and you realize like, hey, this procedure that some person gave me doesn't really work in the real world. I think I have a better way to do this. So you go to your manager and you say, hey, I've got a better way to do this. I think I'll save time. I think I'll save money. And, the response is typically like, well, we can't do anything about that. It comes down from corporate. You kind of get into the spot where you're like, why am I even here if I can't use my brain? I mean, human beings are creative problem solvers. It's essentially how we've gotten to where we are these days. I'm a big fan of, human evolution. And you really see like by working together and solving problems and using our brains, we've pretty much created the world that we live in now. And it's unfortunate that a lot of businesses operate in a way where they don't let people do what they're best at. They put people in these positions where you're doing the same repetitive task over and over and over again, and you have no say over how to change it. So the lean manufacturing techniques that we'd kind of developed for ourselves over time was like, hey, you're the shelf stocker. Tell us how you stock shelves best. And then if you have an idea that's going to make your job easier and simpler and safer, we want to hear that. And a big misconception I think people get with lean is that it's about speed and efficiency, but the real bread and butter of lean is quality, safety, it's quality, and it's simplicity. So like, let's make your job simple enough that you can do it without banging your head against a wall all day. Let's make the outcome of your job quality so that the customers are getting what they need and you enjoy being at work. And then let's take advantage of you being a human being and ask you what you think you should do to make your own job better, and then actually giving people the ability to make those changes without just shooting them down every single time is also a big component of it. But that's really what I've learned, like coming up through the ranks of like operations and HR, is you got to value people. And, when I was doing operations, it was like you're trying to get people to accomplish a task. So obviously there's an end goal in mind. Like we have to get, X number of shipments processed by the end of the day. There's a really tangible outcome there. So if you can get X number of packages done a little bit faster, you're obviously going to be saving time and money.
Right.
But it's not about that. Like, I think the end result of lean is that you do save time and money, but the reason you're doing it isn't to save time or money, if that makes sense. you're doing it to make people better and
Right.
to make processes better and to make your company better. And because you're doing all that stuff, you end up at the end of the day saving time and money, which is really great.
Yeah, and I love that there's a local business owner that buys into this and has really promoted the idea. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that's Paul Akers and he wrote 2 Second Lean. Is that the name of the book?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe we can get him on the show, Chung. We can chat with him about that
Yeah.
because it's a beautiful idea. Just lean is a fantastic method, obviously. But what you're saying behind it is it's about the people. Even though it manufacturing and all the process of that is getting those systems dialed is important, but it's what is the resource? Human. The
Mhm.
resource is human. It's good. That's why it's called HR. It's
Yeah.
not systems resources, it's human resources.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool. Hardware sales is such a I feel like it's an iconic hardware store for Bellingham. Like, I know some builders, and when you talk about hardware sales, it's like everybody goes there. It's like cooler than going to Lowe's or Home Depot. It's just like, how long has hardware sales been around? And you can tell like when you go into hardware sales, all the customer service in there, all the employees are really, really nice and really good at their job. So
Yep.
you give
Yep.
us some
Yeah.
background about hardware sales?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool backstory, especially for a podcast about Bellingham businesses. Hardware Sales is kind of a landmark Bellingham business. It was started in 1962 by a husband and wife named Max and Alta McClellan. The company actually at the beginning in 1962 was called Powder Sales. They actually sold dynamite and explosive powders like right off the shelf to the logging and mining industries, which were the big, major industries in the Pacific Northwest at that time. So the first 10 years of Hardware Sales existence, it was actually called Powder Sales. But it was a husband and wife, kind of mom and pop operation. They started with the two of them, and then they had one person stocking shelves. And, as the years go on, you're like, oh, we need one more person for this, one more person for that. And then they got their kids involved, of course, as any small business owner does. You get your kids out there and make them stock the shelves for you when they're teenagers. So the two children of Max and Alta both got involved in the business. That was a Jerry McClellan and LaDonna McClellan. LaDonna later married, so she's LaDonna George now. But so they were both, and then they became owners of the business eventually as well later on. But in about 1972 is when they made the change from powder sales to hardware sales. Actually changed the name, and we've been in the same building location that we're in since 1972. The original powder sales location was actually across the street, across James Street from where we are now, but we've been in the same building since 1972. And I don't know the exact story about why they stopped selling dynamite, but the moral seems to be that the government regulations seem to get a little bit more intense, and you're like, oh, you can't just sell sticks of dynamite off the shelf anymore, which does make a lot of sense. So
Uh,
they were able to kind of transition from that business model to more of a hardware store model. They already had the logging and the mining folks that were shopping here. So, hey, let's see what they need. They need tools, they need chainsaws, they need to get their chainsaws repaired sometimes. That kind of led to like a service model later on as well. One thing we've done for a really long time is cable and rigging. So, like heavy duty steel cables that you would see being used in a logging or mining operation, safety harnesses, that type of stuff. And I think the story of hardware sales is really one of being adaptable. Being a small family-owned business, to survive for 60 plus years is pretty impressive when you think about like what the country and what the local area has gone through in that time. I
yep.
mean, the logging and mining industries kind of ended, and that was the kind of the Rust Belt era for the Northwest, if that's a good way to put it. The Midwest had their steel mills and all that stuff that shut down in the 70s and 80s that kind of created the Rust Belt. And the Northwest, we had the logging and the mining industries, and those kind of died out as well. So the business had to adapt, and they had to start saying, okay, what kind of customers can we take advantage of now that these industries aren't what they once were? Well, we can get involved with the construction community. We can get involved with, the contractors, the homeowners, the DIY folks that start to supply them with what they need. And that's when the store started to really become what it is now, where it's a standard hardware store. Another cool part of the story is like each generation of hardware sales has kind of added their own, impact to the business. So Jerry McClellan, who is Max and Alta's son, he's the one who kind of started equipment rentals. And it kind of started out with people would come in and, hey, can I like borrow that nail gun over the weekend? And oh yeah, sure. They'll kind of give it to them, give us $10 or whatever. Well, that slowly becomes, you get enough people asking you about something, you kind of think, well, maybe that's a business model. So he started
Right.
renting a few more things. That kind of became the equipment rentals business. And the equipment rentals business now accounts for, at least for the retail stores business, it's almost a third of the overall business is just equipment rentals, which is pretty cool. Jerry also got involved more in like industrial sales. So our big customer bases, we've got a lot of DIY homeowners. We call them our cash customers. They don't have an account here with us, but they walk in, they buy something, they pay with cash or card. Then we've got our like small contractor accounts, which, you know, they might be one person that does their own, you know, contracting business of some kind, plumbers, electricians, home builders, those types of things. Well, then we've got our big industrial clients. So we actually service industrial clients all the way up and down the I-5 corridor, sometimes as far as Olympia. We've got a lot of large like shipyard clients. We do a lot of the work with refineries around here, a lot of major builders and contractors. So once you get to a certain level, we actually start to service you with a personalized like outside sales team, and they kind of act as the purchasing department for those companies. So we're trying to help other local businesses basically get what they need to get their jobs done, because there's a lot of working folks around here, and there's a lot of industries that kind of drive Whatcom County and even the Pacific Northwest beyond that. And we want to be able to supply them with whatever they need to get the job done. So we're really like your shop. You can shop here if you're a skyscraper builder in Seattle. We'll supply you with what you need to do that. But if you're a homeowner down the street and needing a new lawnmower, come get that here too.
Yep, that's me. I'm the consumer, like just homeowner. I've definitely rented some stuff from there. It's such a smart business model, because like who needs like a backhoe for, you know, to buy one, or you know, some large equipment, or you get anything there. It's very, you know, you can't do that with other hardware stores. You can't just walk in and can I rent like a tool, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we'll
cool.
rent everything. We have like rose bush pruners, like little hand pruners. And we've got this like awesome little old lady that comes in once a year in the springtime so she can trim her rose bushes, and she rents like gloves and a pruner from us. And then we've got a 20,000-pound excavator. So you can build a house or whatever if you need with that, and pretty much everything in between. But like you said, it's a good business model because not only do you know, regular people like myself off the street, I don't want to spend $1,000 on this tool that I'm going to use one time to do a project. But contractors are also the same way. I mean, if they have to buy equipment, they have to maintain it, they have to service it, they have to store it somewhere. A lot of these big contracting companies, you know, if they spend so much money just warehousing the equipment that they need to do their work, if they can just come pick it up from us, use it for a couple of days and bring it back again, that's a huge overhead off of their plate.
Right.
Yep. Well, and I'm imagining that I remember the first time I went into hardware sales and I was new to living here. This was like 10 years ago. And I don't even remember what I was looking for, but I went in there with my father-in-law. And if the customer service I experienced that day is anything like anything, if it's spread across all areas of the business, then you guys are rocking and rolling, because I actually remember it. And I mean that. I'm not making this up. I actually remember being lost because the shelves, you know, it's kind of tight in there. And I remember walking through there and being like, I don't know where to go to get what I needed to get. And my father-in-law went around the corner. He knew what he was doing, and I didn't. And so I'm walking around, and then someone notices that I'm lost, of course, and they asked me a question, and then they guided me directly where I needed to go. And that part's easy, like knowing where to go. But the part that's hard, that's the customer service part that I think was so valuable, is that they recognized me and that I was confused. And so they saw that and immediately did something about it. So I'm guessing that the customer service is like that across the board for you guys.
Yeah, we consider that kind of our foundation of the business. That's something that's carried on for a long time. Again, speaking to the fact that the business has been able to survive a lot of these economic changes over time. It's because people know they can come here, they're going to get treated well, but they're also going to get knowledgeable advice. I don't want to name any names, but sure, you go to a store and first of all, you try to find somebody to help you, and you can't find anybody. Second of all, maybe you find somebody, but they can't really point you in the right direction. Oh, I think it's like over there somewhere. It's on the other side. So you end up walking around with no idea where you are, looking for something. And then even if you get down to the point where you're trying to pick between 2 or 3 different items, you're asking, hey, which one of these 3 should I buy? They might not be able to give you very good advice. So we really look for people that not only have good customer service, kind of on a foundational level, but they also have the knowledge to be able to answer those questions. So, you know, which one of these 3 saw blades do you want? Well, what are you going to do with it? They can actually ask you those questions, and then hopefully you leave here feeling like you were treated well, but also knowing like, hey, I have exactly what I need to do this job. I'm not just guessing here, I'm just going to buy this one because I think it'll work. It's like, no, this one is going to work for you. We like to give people options, mid-range, high range. You don't need the professional tools if you're just a homeowner
Right.
who's going to be hanging up some pictures on your wall. This drill will be fine. But if you're going to be building houses with it, maybe you need to buy the couple $100 one.
Yeah, I love that. That personal touch and actually knowing who the customer is and what they're looking for is, I mean, heaven forbid we ask a question that the organization asks us a question about what we're looking for. Like, oh my goodness, what a concept. So I love it that you guys do that and you've empowered your team to be able to do that really well. Being in the middle of Bellingham and being there for as long as you have been yourself, can you talk to us a little bit about what are the highlights for you in terms of places to go? Like you probably go to lunch periodically in town. Do you have a special places you like to go for coffee or lunch and just places that stand out to you?
Yeah, I live down in Fairhaven on the south side of town, so I typically try to hang out there more often, but I do work, kind of more on the downtown side where hardware sales is located. I guess just speaking generally for a second, I really like how Bellingham is very locally oriented. Like the fact that you can walk down the street and go to a lot of these locally owned kind of mom and pop food and beverage places, or hardware sales is kind of the same way, is really cool. There's obviously chains around and you get your Starbucks and your things like that, which is cool, but the local feel of it is really awesome too. So I typically try to shoot for those types of environments. There's a couple of breweries in town that are really good. The local breweries, like Wander is a really good one if you're just looking to hang out and have a beer. Colshan is another one of those like Bellingham businesses that's been around for a really long time, and they do a ton of good work in the community. As far as food goes, there's a couple newer restaurants that I've been into lately. There's the Red Light in downtown Bellingham. They used to be over by the old Green Frog, if you ever went over there back in the day. They've now moved locations. They're on Grand Avenue, and that place is incredible. It's like an Asian fusion style restaurant. They don't take reservations, so you kind of have to put your name in and then wait for it to be called out, which is kind of fun too. But incredible food. That's kind of been my number one dinner spot lately. And then as far as the Fairhaven side goes, where I live down there, I've always loved going up to the Black Cat. Like that, the building is so cool. It's probably built in the late 1800s, and the Black Cat's got this really kind of cool old-fashioned feel, and you have to walk up the grand staircase of the old building to get there. They've got pretty affordable food that's actually really good as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I love it. I've enjoyed the Black Cat myself with my wife. Good times for sure. So if you were going to advise somebody that's going to come and visit and they're going to be here for a day, it's the middle of the winter like it is now, what would you suggest that they do? If they're going to come and visit and they're going to have a good experience, what would be the journey you would want them to go on?
Yeah, in the middle of winter, I mean, as long as it's not like completely pouring rain, I still suggest getting outside because there's so many cool places to get to within like Bellingham city limits. Go walk in Whatcom Falls Park.
Mm.
As far as a local kind of city park goes, that's pretty cool. You got these big waterfalls that you can walk by. I would say go stroll through Whatcom Falls Park. I would say go down to maybe Clayton Beach out in the Chuckanuts. It's another area that's kind of been built up over the years. There's now like an official trail and stairs down there, where it used to be kind of just a trail in the woods that we used to trek down in college. But go down to Clayton Beach, you don't really realize it's an actual like sandy, nice beach, which is kind of rare for the Pacific Northwest in general. But you get to get that bay feel there. You can see the San Juan Islands across the water. It's just incredibly beautiful. And if you're trying to do more of a physical endeavor, any of the hikes in the Chuckanuts are fantastic. Obviously, the Oyster Dome would probably be my first recommendation if somebody's never been to the area before, just to get that view. There's not really anything like that. But depends what they're really into, because you got the mountain biking trails. Galbraith is, I'm going to argue one of the best locally accessible trail systems in the United States, considering you can ride there from downtown. Like that's pretty incredible. So go to Galbraith. And then we talked about Mount Baker earlier. If you're a skier or snowboarder, that's another one where it's an hour and a half drive, which is not very far for a ski resort of that high quality. And they're also a family-owned operation. Mount Baker's never sold out to a big ski corporation. Like you got a lot of the big conglomerate ski companies nowadays who are buying up resorts. They've still got that local feel to them as well. It's kind of I feel like it's the Bellingham way almost. We're almost like anti big store, like anti-corporation in some ways. We like want to fight and keep that feel. And you can see it when you walk through town and you go to these local businesses, is they do not, they just want to be that type of company. They don't want to sell out. They want to be a local business. And I think the community tends to reciprocate that. They feed back into that and they support each other. And then the other cool thing about Bellingham is all the businesses tend to help each other out. It's not like this big competition to see who's going to win. It's like, hey, we're all going to survive here. If I send customers to you and you send customers to me and we do collaborations and we market together, it's about all of us getting better together. So walk through downtown, go to Fairhaven, and whatever else you need to do there.
Love it. So if you could, can you share with us a little bit more about how people can, connect with Hardware Sales? And do you have anything that you'd like to offer to the listeners as a thank you for listening to the show?
Honestly, the best way to connect with Hardware Sales is to come here, because there's so much here that it's really hard to put on paper, but you need to walk around the store a little bit, get lost, like you said, go down one of these
Right.
aisles that you don't know where it's going to lead to, and you're going to find that we've got anything that you're going to need. So that's the first thing. We do have a website. It's not very interactive in terms of, like, you can't really order stuff on the website, but hardwaresales.net, if you just want to check it out on a basic level, do that. But come here and walk around a little bit. I think you'll experience some of that customer service that we were talking about earlier. It's certainly something that we carry with us to this day. We want to be the friendliest store in the county. That's something Jerry McClellan said at one point. And we try to live up to that every single day. So I'd say come walk around a little bit. And we'd love to give any listener who's interested or who wins your raffle or whatever you want to do, a $50 gift card to make that first trip for them super beneficial. Come pick out something that they want.
That's awesome. We really appreciate that. Well, Tyson, thank you so much for being on the Hey Bellingham podcast. We've learned a ton about Hardware Sales and about you, so really appreciate you and what you're doing in the community.
Yeah, thank you.
Local hearts glow in the city we confide. Artists, owners, voices bring it alive. Sharing the secrets